Welcome back once again to ASHA and Ganga Jamuni weekly lecture series on reflections on shared past. As all of you are aware, we meet you twice a week. One on Fridays to talk on primary sources for study of medieval Indian history, and on Sundays to discuss our shared past. We started on 4th of October with Dr. Umar Nadeem Tarar, and till date, 11 talks have been delivered as part of these two series. Today, in our 12th and last program scheduled for November, we have a scholar, Dr. Corinne Lefèvre, who works on Mughals at Paris. I am told that it was way back in 1998 that after learning Persian, she turned her attention to Indian studies. Corinne completed her PhD in history from EHESS under the supervision of Sanjay Subramaniam. Her research was on the relationships between imperial power and the military, administrative, and religious elites during the time of Jahangir. She published a book on Jahangir's period in 2018, which is in French. All of us are aware that since long, no worthwhile publication on Jahangir had seen the light of the day. After Beni Prasad's History of Jahangir, the team did not see any worthwhile publication. Her book tries to fill this lacuna. Fortunately, the English translation of the French title will soon be published in India by Permanent Black, as the English title being Imperial Power and Elites in Jahangir's Mughal India 1605 to 1627. Let me, however, also mention another recent publication on Jahangir, which came out in 2020 and is available on Amazon. And this is the title, The Emperor Jahangir, Power and Kingship in Mughal India, authored by Lisa Balaban Leelar. Apart from this book, which Corinne has written on Jahangir, whose English translation we are all impatiently waiting for, she is currently continuing to re-examine the Mughal Empire of the early 17th century with particular attention to the reign of Shah Jahan. The results obtained will be used to analyze the construction of Mughal Imperium over the long period 16th to 18th centuries and to highlight the role played by Asian connections in this process. Let us welcome Dr. Corinne Lefèvre, who will deliver a talk to us on Islam and Empire in India, the Pachas' sacred authority and religious pluralism in Mughal times. Over to you, Dr. Lefèvre.
Thank you, Nadeem, for this very kind introduction and for the invitation to this wonderful series of lectures. I'm very happy to be with you on this gray Sunday in Paris. You're a sunshine in a very gray day in Paris. So let me start my presentation with a few simple questions. To what extent may the Mughal Empire be described as an Islamic state? Were Mughal times a golden age of interreligious harmony between Muslims and Hindus, or on the contrary, a dark age of discrimination and persecution for non-Muslims? Was there any such thing as Mughal Islam? And if so, What were the characteristics of it? Before addressing these long and hotly debated questions, I will start with a few words of general introduction for those of you who are not very familiar with the Mughal Empire. So officially, its history begins in 1526 with the conquest by Babur, the founding father of the dynasty, of a substantial part of North India. And this history, this official history, ends in 1857 with the so-called Sepoy Mutiny, the deportation to Burma of the last Emperor Bahadur Shah, and the advent, a year later, of the British Raj, that is to say, the colonial rule of the British Crown over South Asia. My ambition today is not, however, to cover the 3 centuries during which the empire was a prominent actor of the Indian political landscape. Rather, my presentation will focus on the 1.5 century spanning from the first conquest of 1526 to the death of Aurangzeb, the last great Mughal in 1707. That is to say, a period during which the Mughal Empire progressively became the largest and most powerful Islamic power of early modern times. By the end of the 17th century, the little kingdom founded by Babur had grown into a massive polity that stretched over 3 million square kilometers, and that was inhabited by circa 120 million people. In other words, Mughal rulers commanded a far greater territorial and human resources than their 2 major rivals, the Ottoman sultans in Istanbul and the Safavid Shahs in Iran. So, in addition to this very general framework, there are a number of points that are important to keep in mind. One is the fact that the Mughals were Muslims of Turco-Mongol origins, and in contrast to the earlier dynasties of the Delhi sultanates, they could boast of such illustrious ancestors as the world conquerors Genghis Khan and Timur or Tamerlane. Another salient feature of the dynasty is its gradual Indianization through a series of matrimonial alliances. As you can see on this chart, emperors became, from Jahangir's onward, kind of mestizos whose mothers were the daughters or sisters of the many Rajput warlords that were vying for power in Rajasthan. And also, it's worth noting that these women were not required to convert to Islam once they entered the Mughal harem. Finally, one should mention 2 significant statistical elements. A century and a half after Babur's conquests, Muslims remained a small minority in an Indic environment. The well-known Latin phrase cuius regio eius religio, according to which the religion of the ruler was to dictate the religion of those ruled, was certainly not true for Mughal India. Besides, by the end of the 16th century, 16% of Mughal rank holders, that is Mansabdars, were Hindus, and their percentage increased twofold during the next century, reaching 32% under Emperor Aurangzeb, who, as we will see later, as many of you know, had a reputation for bigotry. So these few indicators are enough to answer already a number of important questions and to escape fruitless debates. On the one hand, they show that the Mughal Empire, and more generally, the political domination of Islam over South Asia, was not synonymous with massive conversion. On the other hand, they clearly indicate that Muslims, despite being a minority, dominated state administration both at the central and regional levels. In other words, Islam was the religion of a minority who was socially and politically dominant. So, if, as we have just seen, the Mughal state was far from being religiously neutral, does it mean, as Hindu nationalist historians actually argue, that the empire founded by Babur was bent on discriminating and persecuting non-Muslims? For the moment, let us just note that such an image does not fit well with the Mughal Rajput matrimonial alliances, nor with the incorporation into the state apparatus of non-Muslim elites that I have mentioned earlier. Conversely, and following the lead of major figures like Jawaharlal Nehru or Amartya Sen, should we consider the Mughal Empire the architect of an Indian secularism or of a proto-national unity transcending religious boundaries? However attractive this interpretation may sound to those of us who believe in xenophilia rather than in xenophobia, that is no reason to elude the elements that contradict this idyllic vision. Under Mughal domination, a number of temples were destroyed and some non-Muslim religious leaders were jailed or executed. Although these episodes of tension were overall relatively rare and complex events, the historian cannot possibly ignore them, and nor can she or he overlook the discriminatory taxes to which non-Muslims were subjected, even though in this case as well, things are more complicated than they seem at first sight. A symbol of this discriminatory taxation policy, the jizya, which was a poll tax of 2.5%, was, for instance, abolished between 1579 and 1679, that is to say, during most of the dynasty's golden age. Obviously, then, there is no straightforward answer to the question of the relationship between Islam and empire in Mughal times. So, what I am going to do during the rest of my presentation is to show you two of the most important aspects of this relationship. First, the major forms of imperial Islam that were elaborated and successively or simultaneously practiced by Mughal rulers and their close associates. Using this brief outline of the dynasty's religious ideology as a background, I will then proceed to delineate the different types of interaction that existed between political power and the various religious communities and traditions present in the empire. So, schematically, there were three major kinds of interactions. One was religious patronage, i.e. financial support to institutions and individuals. Second was intellectual curiosity, which generated inter-religious debates, as well as the translation into Persian. As you know, Persian was the official and administrative language of the empire. So translation into Persian of a wide range of non-Muslim canonical texts. And a third type of relationship was hostility, the principal manifestations of which were, as I have briefly mentioned, temple desecration and the imprisonment or execution of religious leaders. So let me move to the first part of my talk. So the first set of questions I want to raise concerns the position of Mughal Pachas or emperors vis-a-vis Islam as a source of spiritual authority. What were the images they sought to publicize in this domain, and what does this tell us about their preferred Islamic orientations? Humble devotion was the most conventional attitude the Mughals adopted vis-a-vis Islam, and it was also the most widespread across the Islamic world, where since the end of the mid-13th century, the Abbasid Caliphate since the end of the Abbasid Caliphate in the mid-13th century, temporal leaders had, by and large, been deprived of spiritual authority in favor of scholars, the ulema, and of mystics, the Sufis. Every single Mughal ruler has, during part or totality of his reign, cultivated an idiom of piety in order to gain legitimacy in the eyes of representatives of institutional and mystical Islam. Concerning the former, the institutional aspect, and the Sunni orthodoxy the ulema generally embodied, one may, for instance, mention the official use of the Hijri lunar calendar, the mention of the Shahada, there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet, on the coins produced in imperial mints. And here you have an Akbari rupee engraved with the Shahada and dating from 1575. Another token of respect from the emperors towards institutional Islam was the monarch's participation in the public celebration of major Muslim festivals, such as the Eid al-Fitr, the breaking of the Ramadan fast. There was also the imperial sponsorship of the Hajj, the annual pilgrimage to Mecca. And here you have an illustration from a late 17th century Mughal pilgrimage guide, with a view of the Gujarati city of Surat, which was the major port of embarkation for Mecca and Medina. And on the right, you can see 3 boats transporting pilgrims to the holy cities. And last but not least, one should also mention the generous patronage by the state of Muslim religious individuals and institutions. However, there is no denying that Mughal rulers are far better known for their devotion to Sufi saints than for their adherence to formal Islam. In this, as in other domains, the dynasty engaged in a selective eclecticism, which comes out clearly when one considers the Sufi orders favored by the successive Pachas. Babur himself was a follower of the Naqshbandiya, a Central Asian brotherhood which penetrated South Asia in the wake of Mughal armies. And the role of the Naqshbandi sheikhs as dynastic peers, that is, as spiritual guides, continued under Babur's successors, Humayun, even though the latter had also close relations with the Shatariya, another Sufi order of Central Asian origins. However, it is the Chishtiya, a very popular brotherhood in South Asia, not the least because of the willingness of its followers to adjust to an Indian environment. It is that order that eventually won the competition over the spiritual guardianship of the dynasty. From the 1560s onward, Mughal emperors regularly visited the mausoleum of Muinuddin Chishti, the founder of the order, in Ajmer. And here you are seeing a slide from the Akbarnama representing Akbars making the pilgrimage to Ajmer. Emperors also generously patronized the followers of the Chishtiya and the shrines attached to the Silsila. Besides, we know that Akbar's devotion to another Chishti saint named Salim prompted him to build a new capital on the site of his tomb in Fatehpur Sikri. Here in white, you see the Mausoleum of Salim Chishti within the larger complex of the Congregational Mosque of Fatehpur Sikri. So not only did Akbar build a whole new city out of devotion for this sheikh, he also named his heir apparent after the saint. And here you have a reproduction of a page from a Mughal album showing on the left Salim Chishti and on the right the young Mughal prince Salim, who was to be the emperor Jahangir. And later in the history of the dynasty, the tradition continued since Aurangzeb himself chose to be buried in the shrine of yet another Chishti saint of the Deccan in Khuldabad. Concurrently, Mughal emperors had started flirting with sacred kingship since the time of Humayun, notably under the influence of the Safavid Shahs, who, let me remind you, began their career as Sufi sheikhs with Shiites leaning, before claiming both spiritual and temporal authority over Iran. Initiated by Humayun, the development of Mughal sacred kingship reached unprecedented heights during the decades surrounding the Islamic millennium, that is to say, 1591-92 of the Common Era. And in consonance with the messianic atmosphere of the time, Akbar eventually presented himself as a saint king whom God had chosen to elevate above the ulema, the Sufi, and the monarchs of his time, and to whom God had granted a religious and political authority that was theoretically meant to encompass the whole world. Akbar's spiritual ecumenism has most famously been epitomized by the motto of Sul-i-Kul. Usually taken to mean universal conciliation, Sul-i-Kul translated into the imperial patronage of major religious institutions, both Muslim and Hindu, into the organization of interfaith disputations at court, and a certain laissez-faire attitude to the plurality of religious practices. In addition, one has to mention the emperor's personal interest in different religious canonical texts, and also his participation in a number of rituals and practices deriving from the various religious traditions present in India, such as sun worship or vegetarianism. In other words, Sul-i-Kul was meant to rally behind the Pachas banner, subordinates of all persuasions, and it should not therefore be mistaken for an esprit de tolérance. Every religion had a place in the empire as long as its adherents recognized the monarch as the saint of the age, and as long as they abided by his laws, both temporal and spiritual. The overwhelming importance of the king's figure in the religious ideology elaborated by Akbar translated further into the development of a master-to-disciple relationship with the elites of the empire. The initiation into the royal spiritual order took place on Sundays. The would-be disciple prostrated himself before the monarch, and then he was awarded a seal upon which was engraved Allahu Akbar, an utterance that was purposely fraught with ambiguity, as it could be translated both as God is great or as Akbar is God. And under Jahangir, so the son and successor of Akbar, this seal was progressively replaced by a miniature portrait of the Padshah, which was painted in the case you are seeing at the moment, or that could be also stamped on gold. And these miniature portraits, they were worn by the disciples either on their turban or, as you see on this sketch, as a pendant. As indicated by the persistence of the nimbus, which was a symbol of the king's sainthood, as indicated by the persistence of the halo in imperial portraits, and here you see two examples on the left dating from the time of Shah Jahan, and on the right from the time of Aurangzeb. So this shows that the idiom of sacred kingship was never completely abandoned by Akbar's and Jahangir's successors, even though it became far less visible in later official sources. Likewise, the subordination of the ulema to the monarch's juridical religious authority was never questioned by their descendants, even by those who, like Aurangzeb, developed a more conservative vision of Islam, which, in his case, derived first and foremost, as Munis Faruqi has shown, from the necessity of distancing himself from many aspects of his father's rule against whom he had rebelled. Besides, and that is something that I would like to emphasize in the second part of my presentation, Mughal sulikul and state pluralism in matters of religious patronage never resulted in an equal treatment of all religious groups. As I have said earlier, the dynasty's attitude vis-à-vis these communities ranged from financial support to hostility, and it included intellectual curiosity. And in all that, one of the key factors presiding over the monarch's decisions was the perceived political utility or threat that these groups represented at the regional or pan-Indian level. So let me now move to my first case study. In addition to the Sufi brotherhoods I have previously mentioned, especially the Chishtis, Krishnaites of the Braj country, a region which, as you know, is situated near Agra, with Mathura and Vrindavan as its major centers. So the Krishnaites were among the religious groups the Mughals most lavishly supported. So why was this the case, and what kind of support are we talking about? The first point to keep in mind is that the Braj region, this region where God Krishna supposedly grew up, this region became, from the 16th century onward, a major pole of Hindu bhakti or devotion. Besides, the Kachwahas, the first Rajput clan to have concluded matrimonial alliances with the Mughals, these Kachwahas, they became actively involved in the Braj Renaissance from the mid-16th century onward. It is, for instance, Rajaman Singh, who was also Jahangir's brother-in-law, and whom you see on the left of the slide. It is to him that the construction of the Govidev temple of Vrindavan, which you see on the right, is generally attributed. Last but not least, we have a whole series of Mughal farmans or edicts allocating the revenue of tax-free lands to the temples of Mathura and the neighboring area. The collection stretches from Akbar's to Shah Jahan's time, and if we are to believe the earliest documents, the Kashwahas played, at least initially, a crucial role in the attribution of land grants to Krishnite institutions. To sum up, then, Braj temples attracted Mughal patronage due to a combination of factors. One was the geographical proximity to the heart of the empire. Two was their religious popularity in North India. And finally, there was their strong connection with the Rajput allies of the dynasty, whether they be Kashwahas, had been the case initially, or later on during Jahangir's reign, Bundelas of central India. The political dimension of the Mughals' patronage of Braj Temple is all the more important to understand the episodes of contained or open violence that punctuated the relationship between the dynasty and the Krishnite center. One such episode occurred in 1669 when Aurangzeb ordered the destruction of the Keshavdev temple that had been built during the first quarter of the 17th century by Raja Bir Singh Deo, whose clan, the Bundelas, had by that time raised the standard of rebellion against Aurangzeb. In this, as in the majority of the cases of Mughal sovereign violence against Muslim places of worship, the acts of destruction or desecration must be primarily understood as political actions whose main purpose was to knock out the secular patrons of the temples. So, let us now move to the second major type of politico-religious interactions that I have mentioned in the introduction, that is to say, the imperial will to know and therefore to control the various religious traditions and powers active in the royal domains. The case study I have chosen is that of Catholicism in Akbar's and Jahangir's time. Even though it is admittedly a marginal case in the global history of the dynasty, it nonetheless sheds an interesting light on the atmosphere of openness that prevailed at the Mughal court, but also on the power relation underlying it. So, let me start by saying that the principal actors of the Mughals' encounter with Christianity were the Jesuit missionaries sent by the Portuguese authorities of Goa to the imperial court from the 1518 to 1615. And the purpose of the successive missions was both the conversion of the Pachas and the collection of political and diplomatic information for the Portuguese state of India. If the Mughals, on their part, never seriously contemplated the possibility of conversion, the interest they manifested for certain aspects of Christianity ironically led the Jesuits to believe that they were on the verge of a breakthrough. It is especially true of the rulers' appreciation of Christian religious paintings and engravings, which they avidly collected, and you can see an example here, and also of the Persian translation they commissioned of several Christian canonical texts. And in this process, two individuals played a very important role, and they were the Spaniard Jerónimo Xavier, who headed the third Jesuit mission from 1595 to 1615 at the Mughal court, and on the other hand, the Mughal scholar Abdul Sattar Lahori. Under the instructions of Akbar, the two men respectively learned how to read and write Persian and Latin, and they were given the task to familiarize the Mughal elite with the Greco-Roman and Christian foundations of contemporary European culture. The best known results of the collaboration of these two men were a series of catechistic works written in Persian and which included a life of Jesus and also of the apostles. And here you are seeing an illustration of the Mirat al-Quds representing the Annunciation to the Virgin. In addition to these texts, the recent discovery of a hitherto unknown work by Abdul Sattar, precisely, has led to a thorough reconsideration of the Muslim-Christian debates taking place at the Mughal court. And these debates, which are represented here as an illustration of the Akbarnama, these debates, as I have briefly suggested before, were only one of the multifaceted interreligious disputations that were organized by Akbar and then by Jahangir between the mid-1570s and the early 1610s, with the representatives of a wide variety of faiths. There were Muslims, there were Hindus, there were Zoroastrians, Jews, and Christians. Muslim-Christian discussions are, however, among the best documented, with Jesuit letters providing the missionaries' perspective and Abd al-Sattar the Mughal point of view. So what do we learn when we confront these two contrasted narratives? First, we learn that Mughal Catholic exchanges were dominated by scriptural and doctrinal questions such as the authenticity of the gospel, the divinity of Christ, and the doctrine of the Trinity. The second interesting point concerns Mughal attitude vis-a-vis Christianity. On the one hand, the Jesuit letters consistently emphasized the Pachas' devotion to Jesus and Mary, who are also two highly respected figures in Islam traditionally. The letters also highlight the emperor's intervention in favor of the padres, and they also depict monogamy as the only real obstacle to their conversion. On the other hand, Abdul Sattar account tells us a very different story. If we are to believe him, the Jesuit missionaries had a much harder time at the Mughal court than the Jesuits were ready to acknowledge in the letters they sent to Goa and to Rome. Moreover, the emperors engaged actively in the criticism of Christianity led by the ulema. Despite their underlying universal ambitions, the interfaith disputations conducted at the Mughal court did not include every religious group of the empire. Some of you may already have noticed the absence of the Sikhs, a community that was founded in Punjab in the early 16th century and whose leaders became regular targets of imperial authorities, which leads me to the last type of interaction I would like to mention today. So, according to a common view of the history of Sikhism, and you may, for instance, find it spelled out in the corresponding Wikipedia article. So, according to this view, Mughal domination, which roughly coincided with the creation and development of Sikhism, has been deemed a dark age for this community, and its members still commemorate today the martyrdom of two of its 10 gurus, that is Arjan Singh and Teg Bahadur. So their martyr, their execution by order of Emperors Jahangir and Aurangzeb respectively. As I will try to demonstrate through a re-examination of Guru Arjan's death, and here I'm following in the steps of Louis Fenech, such an interpretation is not corroborated by contemporary and near-contemporary sources, which also indicate that the Mughal-Sikh relationship was far more complex. Concerning Arjan, then, whom you see represented here according to an 18th century portrait on the left hand, and on the right following a now very popular type of imagery. So concerning Arjan, it is first important to emphasize that it is only very late, by the middle of the 19th century actually, that the Guru began to be portrayed as a martyr in Sikh historiography. Before that, Sikh materials were either silent on his death, and that was the case during the 17th century, or they cleared Jahangir of direct responsibility, blaming instead internal divisions within the community. As a matter of fact, the most often cited source used by historians of Sikhism defending the martyrdom theory is the autobiography of Jahangir, where the emperor wrote, and here I'm quoting from the Jahangir Nama. There was a Hindu named Arjan in Guindal. Pretending to be a spiritual guide, he had won over as devotees many simple-minded Indians and even some ignorant, stupid Muslims by broadcasting his claims to be a saint. For a long time, I had been thinking that either this false trait should be eliminated or that he should be brought to the embrace of Islam. At length, when Khosrow passed by there, and this is a reference here to Jahangir's eldest son, who unsuccessfully rebelled in 1606. So this inconsequential little fellow, Arjan, made a mark with saffron on his forehead. That is, Arjan gave support to the prince. And when this was reported to me, I realized how perfectly false he was, and I ordered him brought to me. I ordered his possessions and goods confiscated and him chastised. This version of Guru's death is, however, not entirely supported by the earliest source on the topic, that is to say, a 1606 letter by the Jesuit Geronimo Xavier. According to the missionary, Jahangir had indeed Arjan imprisoned, but he liberated him soon afterwards upon the intercession of a Hindu or a Sikh, a Gentile, so a pagan, and this in exchange of 100,000 cruzados. When the Gentile realized that he would not be able to recover his money, he appropriated the Guru's possession and tormented him until he died. This is the version given by Geronimo Xavier. So, as shown by this brief overview, the conclusions to be drawn from contemporary sources are minimal. If there is no doubt that Arjan had to face the wrath of Jahangir, the reasons for the Pachas' displeasure and the very nature of the official sentence that was pronounced against him remain shrouded in mystery. In these conditions, to consider the Guru a martyr or a political rebel appears equally inaccurate. And a way out of the binary martyr-rebel is to take into consideration a number of elements pertaining to Mughal ideology, on the one hand, and on the other hand, to the situation of the Sikh movement in the early 17th century. One of these elements is suggested by Jahangir's first accusation against Arjan in his memoirs. It may have been the case that the Mughal resented the Guru's capacity to reach out to Hindus and Muslims alike, and that he considered their ability to transcend communal boundaries to be in direct competition with the kind of spiritual ecumenism the dynasty claimed for itself since the time of Akbar. One should, moreover, point out that a number of Arjan's activities and practices looked just like the enactment of sovereignty at the local level, from his levying of annual contributions through representatives to his holding of darbars, that is, court audiences, and his designation as Sache Padshah, that is, as real emperor. From Jahangir's perspectives, then, Arjan and the Sikh movement were also a centrifugal force and a potential threat for the territorial integrity of the empire. Additionally, the growing number of Jat agriculturalists within the Sikh movement may have been yet another factor behind the Mughal intervention. By the early 17th century, the Jat peasants who had settled in Punjab regularly opposed the higher levels of Punjabi rural society as well as local Mughal officials, and they were therefore seen as a source of social unrest in the region. In other words, Jahangir's and later on Aurangzeb's repression against the Gurus should also be interpreted in the light of the ambivalent and even competing nature of the Sikh movement. Another element to keep in mind is the local entrenchment of the Sikh community in Punjab. And finally, one has also to keep in mind the socio-economic demands of its members. In both Arjan's and Tegh Bahadur's cases, I also want to stress that Mughal repression was exclusively directed at the leaders, while Sikh devotees were left unharmed, and actually a number of Sikhs, especially Khatris, still worked in Mughal administration in the 18th century. So, by way of conclusion, I'd like to read to you a few lines from a Voyage to East India, published in 1655 by Edward Terry, who was the Protestant chaplain to Thomas Roe, the first English ambassador to the Mughal court during the 1610s. In that empire, all religions are tolerated, which makes the tyrannical government there more easy to be endured. The Mughal would speak well of all of them, saying that a man might be happy and safe in the profession of any religion, and therefore would say that the Mahometan religion was good, the Christian religion good, and the rest good. Therefore, the ministers of any religion find regard and esteem among the people. And I shall speak something of this from my own particular usage there. I never went abroad amongst that people, but those that met me, upon this consideration that I was a padre, for so they called me, a father or minister, they would manifest in their behavior towards me much esteem unto me. Terry was only one among many Europeans who were impressed by the Mughal model of religious freedom and who, back in Europe, did not hesitate to use this model to criticize the violent sectarianism and religious discrimination prevalent in the old continent. I actually tend to agree with Terry, and I would even venture to say that even if the religious history of the Mughal Empire was no doubt punctuated by moments of tension and episodes of violence, Mughal Islam was overall far more open and inclusive than the version prevailing in Ottoman and Safavid domains, or than the Catholicism of the early modern French and Spanish monarchies. And I will stop with these last words, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Corinne, for a fascinating lecture. And thank you for going into the details about the Mughal-Sikh relations, which you discussed during the course of your lecture. I hope that you will agree to take some questions which have been asked by some of our viewers. For example, there is a question by Nana Ganguly. Nana Ganguly asks, since you mentioned Mughals were patrons of Sufi sheikhs, which they were, we see there was an exodus of Sohrawardi Sufis from Gujarat and Malwa to Deccan once. Akbar sacked regional sultans. Do you ascribe this only to political turmoil?
Sorry, I didn't catch the second part of the question. So,
you see that there was an exodus from Gujarat and Malwa to the Deccan, and Akbar had sacked the regional sultans. So the question which is being asked at the end is, do you ascribe this only to the political turmoil which was taking place?
You mean what specific circumstances is she referring to?
Well, the question is whether this exodus was part of the religious policy, or was it just politics due to which this exodus was taking place, and this turmoil within the migrations of the various
But at which time particularly? Because I mean, Sufis are circulating all the time, so I'm not seeing a special exodus from Malwa and Gujarat.
Yeah, that is what the Nana Ganguly asks. Nana Ganguly, you may specify further what actually you want to ask as far as this question is concerned.
I'm not. Yeah. To be honest, now I see the question on the screen, and I don't have where the Suhrawardis from Gujarat and Malwa are specifically concerned. This is not a matter I've been looking at in details, but what one could say is that, of course, with the conquest or reconquest, or let's say the consolidation of Mughal power of this region, there is always the competition of the attractiveness of the Mughal center increases, whereas these regional sultanates, which came to be progressively incorporated within the empire, became less attractive, or attractive at the first stage for people looking for patronage. And so, of course, political unrest is an additional factor for coming to the court.
Nana Ganguly is in fact referencing the question from Richard Eaton's work on Sufis of Bijapur. Nana Ganguly, you say that Akbar did sack Gujarat, but you should always remember that from the Battle of Panipat, there was a tussle between the Gujarati sultans and the Mughals themselves. The ruler of Gujarat was one of the participants, along with Ibrahim Lodi, at the Battle of Panipat, when the Battle of Panipat was fought in 1526. He was badly defeated along with the others, ran back home, and after reaching Ahmedabad, he found that he had been overthrown by his brother. And after many years, he could gain back the throne. And by the time that he gained the throne once again, by now, as far as North India was concerned, Humayun had ascended the throne, and thus it started a tussle between Humayun and the Gujarat ruler Bahadur Shah. And we know that one of the pressures on Humayun, a very tough pressure, which was being put on Humayun, was from the side of Malwa, where Bahadur Shah of Gujarat was sitting and trying to push towards the territory which Humayun was holding. So in fact, the tussle between the Mughals and Gujarat continued up till the period of Akbar, when ultimately Akbar conquered the territory of the Suba of territory of Gujarat and made it into a Suba. So I don't think that it would mean anything else. That is, there is no religion involved there. It is just the fact that the Muslim rulers of Gujarat were opposed to Babur, who was also a Muslim. It was a fight between two, princes. It was a fight for principalities. And let us not read any religion as far as this is concerned. There is a question by a request, not a question, by Nazar Aziz Anjum. He teaches at Aligarh Muslim University, and he says that, Madam, please shed some light on Jahangir's meeting with Jadrup or Chitrup Gosain. You remember that on Chitrup, Professor Shirin Muswi has written a beautiful article. So could you add to something on that?
Yeah, it's a very important figure. So there are many things to be considered in this relationship. One that is important is that in this, as in many other cases, Jahangir was following in the footstep of Akbar, because Akbar had already some relationship with the guru. And one thing that is interesting in the relationship, so Jadrup is really stands out as a symbol of Jahangir's, let's say, openness toward Hinduism, a certain kind of Hinduism, whereas you don't find details of single, prolonged, repeated encounters exactly in the time of Akbar. So he really he made him a symbol of his kind of relation with Hinduism, but also Jadrup was also tried to not manipulate, but to benefit the most from this relationship as has been as well shown in the very, very interesting sectarian later literature written on the guru. So it's a very important figure. Yes.
I would like to just, Corinne, add something to that as a query. There is one mendicant who meets Akbar, Devi. But you have a whole story that how Devi went to Fatehpur Sikri, how while sitting on a cot, the cot was raised up to the level of the emperor, and they had a meeting the whole night. The emperor was sitting in the Jharokha with floating outside, Devi on the cot, discussing the religious matters. So it's a powerful image which is created. But on the other hand, this image which we just saw of Jahangir talking to Jedruk, the location shifts. It is not the court. It is not the the saint visiting the ruler. It is vice versa. So can you talk something about this symbolism and the difference between the two connections? Akbar is also connected with such type of people, mystics and yogis and saints, Hindus for that matter. In fact, while at Paris along with you, I had come across a number of references in Chaurasi Vaishnava Ki Varta, which had been published during that period, and Dr. Nalli Dalvoy had supplied me with a copy of that a number of saints of the Vaishnava creed claiming that Akbar was inviting them, but they are not going to meet him. That type of an imagery. On the other hand, Jahangir going out of the way, visiting the jungle cave, meeting the saint, it is being now drawn, becoming a part of the imperial atelier, the whole army standing outside, the whole regalia behind it. What type of message is being conveyed? Corinne, can you just?
Yeah, I think that what is also interesting, the religious signification of the image is what we tend to focus on, but I think it has also to be interpreted in the context of how do you say that? In the context of Jahangir's kind of ethnographic curiosity vis-a-vis Jadrup. He talks about in the autobiography. He talks about his let's say its religious ideas, etc. But it comes also side by side with a very precise description of his habitat. He gives the length and height of the cave. He describes the physical appearance of the guru, and this is something that is also very apparent and meaningful, I think, in the painting you briefly showed and mentions. Side by side, you see the kind of the continuation of the interface disputation that were held in Fatehpur Sikri, the one-to-one meeting you were referring between Akbar and this yogi. And you find also that the religious signification of the painting is only a layer of what was involved in the relationship of the two men.
Well, Corinne, I'm sorry, I'm dilating on this issue. I mean, because it somehow interested me after your talk. A few weeks back, we had another speaker in this series, Acharya Srivats Goswami ji of Vrindavan. He spoke on these temple grants and what happened to these temples and how they were created and whatnot. Now, very interesting information, which is not too much in the domain, is that although Akbar gave all sorts of grants to these temples, especially Govind Dev, which you yourself showed, came into existence by not only Kachwahas but by the grant which was given by the Mughals.
Yeah.
Right, by Akbar.
But Kashwahas were instrumental in the grant, but you're right.
Yeah, but as she was pointed out, that although Akbar was invited again and again to visit Vrindavan, he never once went there. On the other hand, he told us that it was Jahangir who visited the temples at Vrindavan. So the same person. That is also to be remembered. I mean, I'll come to this issue a little later after I have finished asking the other questions which have been put up to you, because I would like to discuss this particular, issue related with Jahangir. Now, there is a question before I go into all that. There is a question by Satoshi Ogura. Did Prince Salim arrange to claim sacred authority in Allahabad when throwing himself into a power struggle with his father Akbar? For example, did the compilation of Nizamuddin Panipati's Persian translation of Yog Vashisht have an intention to overlay the image of the liberated Prince Ram with Salim?
I think that this is a very thanks Satoshi for the question. This is a very important question because, as you know, generally received wisdom has it that in order to win the competition for the throne, Salim had to, and he did, publicize an image of a more conservative version of Islam compared to Akbar. But actually, if you look at the kinds of manuscripts and paintings he commissioned in Allahabad, which are not all we had, but the main sources we have to reconstruct his discourse as a prince. We also have a number of documents. We have the retrospective notation transcribed in the Jahangirnama. But so if you look at these productions, included the Persian translation of the Yoga Vasishta, you see that already in Allahabad, Salim was thinking of himself, in terms of a ruler who had both temporal and spiritual authority. You have also a very well-known portrait, which is currently at St. Petersburg, which shows Salim on a throne, which is comparable, full of allusion to the throne of Solomon. And you have other images in the Mughal albums collected by Salim, that already from that time onwards, he was seeking association with a figure such as Solomon, who, as you know, is one of the very important, let's say, figure associated with sacred universal kingship. So that was already there, even though that was not, let's say, a public image that he was ready to share beyond the circle of his most loyal supporters at the Allahabad court.
Right. Well, there is a thought which has been put forward by Dr. Ali Kazim. The typical, religious policies which were followed by the Mughals. How far do you see the hand of the Mongol mythical queen Alan Khoa in that? I mean, you know that the Mongols had a particular type of. So he just wants to ask whether that type of a policy which Mughals were following was a continuation of the Mongol policy of
I think
tolerance.
it had it was something that they had on their mind, not I think with regard especially to Alan Koa, even though Alan Koa is very much present in the dynastic ideology through this idea of light inhabiting her descendants, including the Mongol. But yes, it is true that the descendants of Genghis Khan also organized that kind of interface disputations, who later on the Mughals became famous too. And in that respect, I think that it was a model, a legacy, even though we don't have a specific reference. I mean, I haven't found myself specific reference to that kind of gathering in Mongol times from the Mughals, but I think that it was an important memory and model for them. Yes.
Well, there is, a question by a very senior but retired bureaucrat, T.C.A. Raghavan, who is also an author, who has written a beautiful book on Bairam Khan Khane-Khanan, which was published a few years back. He thanks you, but then he asks, my question pertains to the transition from Akbar to Jahangir and later to Shah Jahan and Aurangzeb. What explains the changes in the relationships between empire and religion beyond the personality of individual rulers? Or do you feel that there was not much change beyond nuances because of personality differences?
Yeah, thank you for the question. That's a very complex question, I think, and we are still, at least I am still struggling with it. What I see, and it's something I alluded to in the introduction, I think that what really changes is that under, I mean, from the latter part of Akbar's reign and Jahangir's reign, you have a consonance between a harmony, let's say, between the official political discourse and, by and large, the action. There is not really a division between what is said officially and what is practiced every day. And this begins to change progressively until the time of Aurangzeb, where more and more under the pressure, I think, of the more conservative Sufis and ulamas. This is, as you know, there were already trouble with them during Akbar's reign. It continues under Jahangir, and even though they are still subordinate to the emperor, the critics from that group of people, which is very important, will remain. And the response from the Mughal to these demands from the conservative ulema and Sufis will be slowly to divide the official discourse, showing more, let's say, obedience to Sunni Orthodox regular Islam, but continuing a practice which is very liberal in respect, especially to what existed in other Muslim empires of the day. Again, I think that we have to take some distance from the Indian context purely, and to look at what was happening elsewhere in the Islamic world. And it's not only in the Mughal Empire that from the, let's say, the second half of the 17th century, you see a turn towards a more conservative version of Islam at the highest level of power, and also within the milieu of ulema and Sufi.
Right. There is some echo taking place, possibly. Whatever. Now, let me thank Mr. Raghavan for putting up this question. Let me also inform the viewers that very soon we would be having Dr. Raghavan himself as one of the speakers, and he would be speaking on the Mughal aristocracy with special reference to Bairam Khan. Thank you, sir, for joining in to ask this question. Now, Nanak Ganguly has articulated a question which almost all of you are asking you. When is the English translation of your book coming out?
I'm working on it, but hopefully in, let's say, next year in 2021. And it will be much clearer than my presentation today. So read it when you can, when it's out.
Dr. Corinne Lefèvre, it was a fascinating lecture. Before I thank you and call Shagufta Siddi to thank you, I had something of my own to add to what you had said. I mean, for example, I just mentioned that there is a both Akbar and Jahangir, both are known to have followed the policy of Sulhul. Tuzuk very well mentions, there is a whole paragraph where, in spite of the fact that Jahangir had rebelled against his father, but now after his father's demise, he is writing, admiring his father and saying that what I am doing today is not anything new. This is what my revered father had done. In fact, during my father's period, the various sects would come together to pray in a single mosque. I mean, this is what Jahangir, in fact, writes about his father. He keeps on visiting the palaces at Fatehpur Sikri, and if you read those passages, they are full of admiration for Akbar. Even at a time when Jahangir was a rebel, we know that he at Allahabad he issued a coin, that famous Ram Sita coin, which although is not by him as an emperor, because he's still a prince at that moment of time, but still he comes out with Ram and Sita image. And incidentally, the image of Ram is also there at Fatehpur Sikri. There is a sculpture in one of the palaces of Fatehpur Sikri where Emperor Akbar would himself sit within that palace, and on one of the brackets there is Ram and Lakshman who are drawn there. So I mean, there are so many similarities between both of them. although differences are also there, as I tried to point out, that Devi and others visited the court of Akbar. Akbar wanted all those saints to come to him, where he would discuss. Jahangir, is depicted as if he is visiting these saints himself. All sort of things are there. In spite of that, in spite of everything, Akbar today is taken to be a man of peace, and Jahangir is being accused by almost all religious denominations as a demon. For example, take the Sikhs you mentioned. Guru Arjan was actually, there is no evidence, concrete evidence to prove that Jahangir had him executed. Even if he had him executed, there was a political reason, there was no religious reason behind it. So, but still, the Sikhs today, if you go to Golden Temple today, you would find, an exhibition, permanent exhibition there with how the Mughal, atrocities against the Sikh community took place. And there, the image of Jahangir is that of a cruel man. The Shias, Jahangir is so sympathetic to the Shias in a way. But, almost the whole of the entire, in the Shia community of the Indian subcontinent, they accuse Jahangir for having executed Qazi Nurullah Shustari. You are one of those who had, one of the first to have gone through that Majalis-e-Jahangiri. It was you who scanned a copy for me and gave me a Xerox of Majalis-e-Jahangiri when I was there at your center. I'm really thankful to you for that. Now, there, in one of the discussions which Abdul Sattar, mentions, that Jahangir is constrained to be claiming, no. I did not do such an act. That was not my religious ill will that I did something like that. Meaning thereby that even during the contemporary period of Jahangir, there were accusations of religious discrimination against Jahangir. My question to you, and similarly, the Jains are there, other religious communities are there, or for that matter, even among the Sunnis, the episode of Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi, he being thrown to jail. There are a number of Mujaddidiyya sources who are actually, although they keep on praising Jahangir, that Jahangir did listen to Mujaddid al-Fisani, wrongly in fact, but this is what they claim. But inside their hearts, whenever they come to this, episode of Mujaddid al-Fisani being thrown into jail for 1 full year, that is something which disturbs them. So in a way, whether they are Sunnis or the Shias or the Jains or the Hindus, why is it that he was, treated differently from Akbar? Akbar had also incidentally, exhumed a dead body and thrown away the dead body because one religious sect was not liking the man of other religious sect to be buried near the tomb of a saint. So he was also discriminating on the basis of religion, but no one accuses him. He is Akbar the Great. Jahangir is being accused by all. Corinne, I want to hear from you. What happened? Why poor Jahangir, although he did everything, yet he became
first, he was, I would say, easier to attack than Akbar. Even though, beyond the particular facts that you are pointing out, he did not enjoy the reputation of Akbar, even though Akbar was also heavily criticized during his own time. So that made him an easier target, and all the more because whereas Akbar had people like Abul Fazl and many others who wrote official, ornate, many official histories of the reign. If you look at the reign of Jahangir from a historiographical point of view, all you had are the memoirs of the empire. And as you know, these are very, on the one hand, they are very traditional. You find mentions of dates and daily events at the court. But on the other hand, this is also a very original and disturbing text, because Jahangir was somebody who liked to make fun of himself, of making fun of others as well, and he had a very, I would say, playful personality that was not easily grasped by everybody. And then every community has its own agenda, as you said. Even though there is not a shred of factual evidence concerning the Sikhs, and that within the Sikh sources themselves, you don't find a trace of Jahangir being held culprit for the execution of Arjan before the 19th century. Today, he's reviled as a demon. So I would, and then where Shushtari or CND are concerned, we tend to consider that the problem was these people, was that they were, for Shushtari that was his Shiism, for Sihindi that was his orthodoxy that was a problem. But in the end, all these people, Arjan, Sirindi, Shushtari, one of the I would say an important aspect of their conflict with Jahangir and beyond with imperial authority was the messianic dimension of their claims. And as you know, Shushtari was not only a Shia, a regular Shia, he was also a Nurbakhshi, another messianic movement of the time. Sirindi was claiming for himself what the imperial power was claiming for itself, that is the possibility to rejuvenate Islam. We are still in the idiom of the Islamic millennium. And so this is only a reflection of the, let's say, the internal competition between different saints, king saints of the age, and then why he fell prey more than Akbar to criticism. I think that in order to understand this, it's also very important to study very closely how the historiography, the negative views, the negative historiographical views of Jahangir are in the end the result of the coalescence of the Mughal tradition, because if you read Shah Jahani chroniclers about Jahangir, they are not particularly, let's say, full of praise regarding Jahangir. And on the other hand, you also have to take into account the Western tradition of writing about Jahangir, whether it be the Jesuits or Thomas Rowe, or then the Dutch and Francisco Pelsaert. All of them, each of them had a reason to depict the emperor negatively, which had nothing to do with what he was doing as a sovereign, but which nevertheless left a lasting imprint on his reputation. And we're still working within that paradigm today. And with my book, this is one of the things I hope that will change in the future, even though it has already started to change. I'm not the only one to have worked on Jahangir, as you said. People like Rajiv Kinra working on Shah Jahan, Munis Faruqi, well, many other people, and the fact also of this Majalis Jahangiri coming out has begun changing the perceptions we have of Jahangir, but it is still restrained to a small academic circle. I think that we will need, I don't know, centuries before let's say the image of Jahangir in the general audience in South Asia and elsewhere really changes, and it might never change, but that's the way it is.
You are quite correct. I mean, this discovery of one source has changed a lot of history as far as Jahangir is concerned. Majalis Jahangiri has yet to be fully exploited, and I hope that as more and more historians pay attention to it, there are a number of historians at Aligarh who have tried to interpret Jahangir's period, reinterpret Jahangir's period, basing on the information which is given there in Majalis. Sanjay Subramaniam has done a lot, as you know. There are a lot of people, and I hope that this attempt would keep developing, and soon, when we read your book, we may have a new perception of Jahangir. But before we start reading your book, we don't know what you have dealt with that or not. I will just tell my audience that there is a source not hidden, like Majalis had been for years. It was a source which was a manuscript which was bought by Professor Nurul Hassan at Aligarh, Tazkira Pir Hasuteli. There is a Tazkira written by a resident of Lahore, Surat Singh, and he was a disciple of Pir Hasuteli, one of the saints of the oil presser community of Lahore. And hopefully I would be dealing with this Tazkira in one of my subsequent lectures that has much information. It was in fact written during the period of Shah Jahan, not Jahangir, but there is one particular information which is very relevant for today's lecture, and that is that Surat Singh, being a mystic and one of the disciples of a mystic, once he claims that he used to mystically meet Baba Nanak during his dreams.
Okay.
And he gives a number of, he also met him, for example, Hazrat Ali and the Prophet himself in the dreams. So his dreams are, very hi-fi type of things. He met very great people and how he interacted and so on and so forth. But then along with that, he also informs that he had the opportunity of visiting the tomb of Baba Nanak, which was besides a river. And he, in a number of verses, which I have translated in one of the volumes which have been edited by Professor Irfan Habib and J.S. Grewal on 6 sources, Mughal sources of Sikh history. There I have, one on Banda Bahadur, a piece on Banda Bahadur, and another on Surat Singh's claimed visit to Baba Nanak's grave, and the episode of Baba Nanak's death, which he describes. It's a fascinating one. It gives you the, point of view that, okay, by Jahangir or Shah Jahan's time, the Sikhs had not developed into a full-fledged religious community at all, but they were known as Nanak Panthis. They were a sort of a Bhakti Sufi sect, which was very vibrant, very popular amongst the peasant community. Maybe that was one of the reasons the peasants, if Habib has already discussed how there was a rivalry between the state and the peasantry, Zamindar and the peasantry. So the Sikh community, whatever Sikh community, the Nanak Panthis from Kashmir to Lahore to the North India, they were all mostly coming from the peasant communities, and possibly that might have been one of the reasons of the clash. But I would recommend, Corinne, if you haven't gone through, I'll try to send you a copy of that. The Tazkirah Pir Hasuteli, that has been, I have published a facsimile copy of that during the period when I was the chairman of the Department of History. I will try to send a copy of that to you. It's a very interesting account. Now, another thing which is very interesting, and I hope that all of us who are listening to the lecture would pay attention to this, is that it is Akbar who is basically known for Ibadat Khana discussions. Ibadat Khana equal to Akbar. Whenever we, even sometimes in the objective type, questions, Ibadat Khana, the answer is Akbar. Where was Ibadat Khana? Fatehpur Sikri.
Yes.
Now there are sufficient number of references. Corinne would be knowing much better than me that the concept of the Ibadat Khana discussions continued for a long period of time during the reign of Jahangir. In fact, there is a text where it's a Tatammai Akbarnama, possibly I may be forgetting the name, but there is, when after his revolt and after everything had happened, Prince Salim ultimately returns back to the imperial court. Akbar is at Agra at that particular moment of time. He appears before Akbar, he is presented before Akbar. The courtiers inform the emperor that now the prince has reformed himself. Now he's a good man. He wants to go to the harem. The emperor says, no question. I hear that he drinks a lot, and he won't be allowed to go to the harem. And the emperor decrees that for the coming 10-15 days, he should be put up in the Manzile Ibadat Khana, the structure of the Ibadat Khana. Now, I'm not going into the details of what actually happens and how he reforms. The fact is that even at the Qila'e Agra, there was a Manzile Ibadat Khana. Not only the discussions were being held, this Majalis-e Jahangiri is a part of the recordings of those discussions. Apart from that, there are many other such discussions which have, some of them have been published. There are so many discussions which took place under Jahangir which have been published. But this particular reference gives context that there was also an assigned place where these discussions were taking place. So that is why, I personally find, although I have worked much more on Akbar rather than Jahangir, I say that poor Jahangir has been neglected. People pay attention to Shah Jahan for his Taj Mahal and to Akbar for his Sulekul. In between, Jahangir is lost somewhere. I am really thankful to historians like Corinne Lefèvre, who after a very long time have taken up this work. In fact, Corinne has not only done a book, but a series of articles of hers are dealing with the reign of Jahangir. I really thank you, Corinne, from the bottom of my heart for highlighting the reign of an emperor who is actually very much neglected. Now over to Shagufta to thank you formally for this beautiful session.
Thank you very much.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful session. And thank you so very much for shedding light on so many aspects that needed to be talked about. And of course, there's more to come. I want to share this since everyone's talking about this. I want to share that my relationship with your work started with, of course, your article in 2007 that I read in JSTOR. Now, this article was, about recovering a missing voice from Mughal India. And you talked about Jahangir and how you talked about how he's sort of seen and viewed as this political lightweight, and he was dominated by Noor Jahan, and how your article actually tried to re-examine his memoirs. And so I really enjoyed that, and I was in masters at that time, and it was just fantastic. So thank you for continuing with this work. And there is, of course, the English edition of your book that everyone awaits and has mentioned. I want to also inform our viewers. First, I want to thank you for being consistently with us, asking us questions. I just want to announce that on Friday, so this is the December series, on Friday, December 4th, we will be for the sources of Indian medieval Indian history. We will be having a professor from JNU, Professor Najaf Haider, and he will be talking about the very important Banarsi Dases at the Kathanak, which was also discussed on last Friday. So on Sunday, the 6th of December, Reflections of a Shared Past. In this series, we will have Professor Francesca Orsini from SOAS, and she will be talking to us about before the Hindi Urdu divide. So please stay with us and join us on Friday at 7 p.m. for Professor Najaf Haider, and on Sunday, the 6th of December at 7 for Professor Francesca Orsini. And thank you so very much. I want to thank Dr. Corinne Lefèvre, and also I want to thank Professor Vis-A-Vis. This has been a wonderful evening, and what can one say? More power to Jahangir.
Yes, exactly. Jahangir, president of France. Yes, that would be something.
Yeah, I think might be in the current situation.
I will have to go to Lahore and exhume him, but I'll think about it. No, thank you very much. That was great being in conversation with all of you, and hope to see you in person in a not too far future in Paris, India, or elsewhere. And you take care. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right,
Thank
thank you
you.
so very much. Good night from ASHA and Ganga Jamuni, and see you all next weekend. Good night.
Thank you. Good
Bye bye.
night. Bye bye.